Hola, Minasan! Welcome back for another round of BattleTech Mech Warrior research. We are continuing with the First Secession War. Sven playing. He left us on a cliffhanger because he left out an important note from the first year of the war, of the First Secession War. So we gotta watch First Secession War Apocalypse, BattleTech Lore and History, in order to see what had happened. And we're gonna end up finding out what happened in year 2 of the war. So that's going to be very interesting to see. So yeah, Fence, be sure to head on over to Fence Sven Plank for all things Mech Warrior. Link down in the description below. Make sure to have your notes together for my post research thoughts. This is a call to action. Comment, like, subscribe, follow, hit the notification button, and let us resume the research. Operation Broken Blade. Yeah, I noticed that the towers of people is adding more and more.
The first year of the Succession Wars had proven itself to be one of the most destructive in the history of the Ionosphere. Every faction had already made use of weapons of mass destruction, and there was nothing to prevent their continued proliferation. Many invaders had shown zero regard for innocent lives by targeting population centers in an effort to drive out defenders, while other even more contemptible commanders made the killing of civilians an objective in itself.
That's insane.
Despite being only a diversionary campaign, the largest battle of the war so far had taken place at Skondia between the Draconis Combine and Lyran Commonwealth. Archon Jennifer Steiner had launched raids deep into Kiritan territory to relieve the pressure on the besieged world. Though Skondia had fallen, the massive damage to the shipyards at the capitals of Dieron and Luthien had proven a humiliation for coordinator Minoru Kurita. Now, the survivors of the Skondia invasion fleet were gearing up for a deep raid of their own against the Commonwealth's largest industrial world, Hesperus. Operation Broken Blade was launched in December 2787. Taisho Pedersen again had command of the fleet, though combat losses had reduced its size almost by half. Furthermore, with the campaign against the Federated Suns now in full swing, he had far fewer supporting units to call on. The ground attack was to be led by 2 of the elite Sword of Light regiments, plus another regular and 1 mercenary command. They were evenly matched by 4 LCAF battle mech regiments, and the largest naval flotilla hosted by any non-capital system within the Commonwealth. Confident that he had sufficient ground forces to counter any landing force, Admiral Weisskopf instead focused all his attention on the approaching Draconis Combine Admiralty, bringing to bear the combined might of more than a dozen cruisers. Having expected the defenders to make at least some attempts to intercept the dropships, they did not. The lighter Kiritan vessels found themselves dangerously positioned and outgunned. The initial engagement cost them dearly, and it was all they could do to harass the victorious Steiner fleet in an effort to stop them launching orbital strikes of their own. All 4 of the DCMS regiments had made landfall, but the mountainous terrain on Hesperus meant their landing sites were often far from their intended targets. As they entered orbit, they also discovered to their dismay that the Archon had commenced a massive relocation effort for the factories on Weld, moving many either underground or into caverns within the mountains. Focusing instead on the facilities that still remained on the surface, their approach led them into extensive fortifications and weapons emplacements that inflicted brutal losses on the attackers. Only the Sword of Light regiments escaped off Weld when Pedersen called for a withdrawal a month later. So ended the First Battle of Hesperus. Their raid had resulted in the destruction of the orbital facilities, but what little damage was inflicted to the factories on the surface was repaired within the year. The Draconis Combine would raise the battlemech factories on Sudeten and Yed Posteria the following month, but wouldn't trouble Steiner again for some time. The Tamar Tigers launched their own reprisal raids against Pomme de Terre and Styx, after which the Combine Commonwealth front went quiet for the next year.
Wow, so that's what happened Hesperus. This was what Sven Vanderblank said he left out. And basically they were able to destroy the orbital facilities surrounding the planet and decimate some of the factories on there. It's that was a big blow on the Steiners there. That definitely a big blow. Apparently, that was one of the big moments for them. They tried their best, even though they hit Kurita very hard. But it wasn't enough to stop that incoming onslaught. So yeah, here's Capellan gains.
The Capellans made the last of their strikes against the Corwood Davian worlds around this time, taking Addix, Anka, and Smallworld in January 2788. This minor campaign had won them several systems, but cost a pair of mech regiments. The Deneb Light Cavalry had fought hard against their approach, and on several occasions the Seacath turned to nuclear weapons to clear out defences. They also secured the Terran system of Xian, but ousting the nobility resulted in the Loyal Planetary Guard establishing their own mercenary regiment and signing on with the Federated Suns as the Xian Hotheads.
Xian Hotheads?
With the complete takeover of the Clovis combat region, a new border had been established between the Capellan Confederation and Draconis Combine. The former extended an olive branch and proposed a limited alliance, or at least a mutual non-aggression pact. Unfortunately, the Curitans smarted at the fact that several systems in their campaign path had been stolen from right under their noses. The Combine declared that they would only consider an alliance on the condition that Minoru Kurita be acknowledged as First Lord of the Star League. They also demanded the Seacath launch an immediate attack along the Capellan March border. The Confederation was not prepared to acquiesce on either request. It would be decades before another offer of truce was made between the successor states.
Wow.
Barbara Liao's main focus remained the reversing of the Free World's invasion of her realm. For the past several months, a massive armada of warships and dropships had been gathering at Cyan, now consisting of over 100 vessels, supported by a dozen aerospace regiments and 12 brigades of mixed ground forces. Commanding this new task force was Colonel Jason Devlin.
Now, if I remember,
in late February, the Chancellor gave the order to depart for the League border. Captain General Kenyon Maddock remained unaware of the coming storm.
Duckface. Kenyon Maddock once again.
His forces at the front were still pinned down after the loss of their naval escort. A trio of warships stationed at New Delos were the first to be moved forwards in preparation, something which Mashkarovka agents within the FWLM relayed back to Liao. While a rescue operation was organised, he turned his attention Corwood. Throughout the first 2 months of 2788, Paul Steiner had dispatched the Stealth's mercenary regiment on raids against House Marek, eliminating several major industrial sites at Thermopylae and Wyatt. Later in the year, they were permanently reassigned to Amanda Lestrade's command. The Bolan Thumb allowed Kenyon to manoeuvre forces deep into the Commonwealth, and when they struck at Duantier in reprisal that March, they used nuclear weapons to obliterate the defenders before they had a chance to escape.
Of course they nuked them.
These actions would soon be reversed on the civilians of the Free Worlds League tenfold.
Jeez.
On the Draconis Fedsuns border, First Prince John Davian was taking stock of the calamity that had befallen his nation. The Combine had made massive inroads into the realm. Dozens of regiments were cut off behind the front line, and as the DCMS advanced, garrison forces moved in behind them to finish off the isolated defenders at their leisure. In a desperate attempt to raise new units to help defend the beleaguered state, the premier military academies formed new cadet cadres from their training mechs and rushed them into service with the AFFS. Sakara at the front had mobilised its entire student body out of necessity, while Albion and New Avalon took to reserve roles that allowed more established forces to move forwards. The Curitans had paused their campaign while they geared up for a second wave. They appeared to be waiting for the coordinator to return to the front after he had disappeared to parts unknown earlier in the year. Davian did have a plan to blunt the invasion, however. He had gathered around him some of the most elite forces within his realm, originally with the intention of striking at the Capellan Confederation, but now this force was ready to redeploy against the Curitans. Unfortunately, with the Capellans seizing 9 worlds of their own in recent months, he couldn't afford to leave the Chesterton region undefended. Instead, He siphoned off 3 of his best and paired them with 6 infantry and armor regiments from the Marlet combat region. Operation Solar Shield, as the counterattack would become known, departed for the front line in February. They were ill prepared for what they were about to stumble into. There were just 5 warships in escort, and none of the new task forces had time to train together before they made their assault. The shortage of available warships was a major obstacle for the Federated Suns. That February, the First Prince moved against Terran-aligned Boeing Interstellar to seize the new megaplex at Galax. He could not afford to have this vital facility sitting idle any longer. Control of the new Federated Boeing was given to Euston McCorkindale, making the trusted noble house one of the wealthiest in the Inner Sphere. The pressure was clearly getting to the AFFS High Command, and nowhere is this more apparent than in their ill-conceived decision to launch Operation Brass Ring the following month. The Draconis Combine had tried and failed to destroy the facilities on Hesperus. It had cost them considerably and achieved very little. In a baffling strategic blunder, the Federated Suns decided that they could do better, attacking unprovoked a realm with which they shared no bad blood since the Age of War centuries earlier. Perhaps the hope was to make the Draconis Combine divert some attention against the weakened Lyran Commonwealth, but the reality was that it served only to divert forces that were desperately needed to hold back the Dragon. Only 8 warships of the Federated Suns Navy could be found to escort the raiders to Hesperus. When they arrived in late March, they were confronted by the survivors of the prior naval battle, a little over 20 Lyran vessels.
Wow, 20 Lyrans
Rear
left
Admiral
over at
Hayes
Hesperus?
attempted to use speed as his only advantage, and was able to open a brief window which allowed a battalion of troops to make landfall after a week of skirmishing in space. The alert had long since gone out though, giving the Hesperus guards more than enough time to muster and quickly dispatch the raiders. The AFFS called off the attack in April, having achieved nothing of note. They lingered in the dark space of the Terran hegemony for over a year, licking their wounds.
Wow. So now it makes sense why Sven said that he missed out on Hesperus. This really is a very significant area, this planet in the war. So it's very major with its facility hubs, which of course was destroyed in the first skirmish. The first round of the first operation, where all of its orbital facilities got taken out, and so now that ended up playing another role in Operation Brass Ring on the second go around, with now only 20 vessels remaining at Hesperus, and really leaving everyone there at a disadvantage clearly. So that's a great. That's actually great that the lore meisters use that as a central point. As well, I wouldn't say central point, but as a key point, like a key plot point for the First Secession War. That they were able to come back to that. I'm wondering if they're going to come back to that again later down the line. Like, how big of a role is it really going to play, if at all, or it's just a specific role for this for the specific house, that occupies it. It's clearly something very important to everybody. Well, not to everybody, but in terms of this. Of these two houses. New Delos Massacre.
Later that month, the CCAF's Task Force Devlin appeared in the New Delos system. They had moved through occupied space without drawing attention to themselves by using cracked codes retrieved by the Mashkarovka. New Delos had been the site where the Capellan Confederation and Free Worlds League had put their past grievances to bed at the end of the Second Andurian War. This time, the entire Armada descended on the planet, which had only a single green regiment to defend it. They made landfall around the capital city, cutting off any escape routes, then gave those within just 8 hours to surrender the world. They didn't bother to wait for a response, and launched mass bombing raids soon after. Approximately 20,000 were killed, and more than 200,000 were wounded.
Wow.
The Orloff Grenadiers tried to stop the killing, but were themselves wiped out by the overwhelming Capellan numbers.
Capellan is crazy.
The orders Colonel Devlin had received from Barbara Liao left no doubt in his mind what the objective of this raid was. The killing of civilians took priority over the destruction of the various staging posts and supply depots supporting the Marek militia campaign. And yet, however brutal the attack on New Delos had been, the true horror of the First Succession War was about to be realised in the nearby Stuart commonality.
That's insane.
In early May 2788, a pair of warships appeared in the Helm system, escorting a mech regiment of the Draconis Combine mustered soldiery. With them was the missing coordinator Minoru Kirita. Most of the Stuart Dragoons had long since been redeployed to the Capellan front, leaving only a small militia force in garrison. They alerted the defenders to their presence when they launched a nuclear weapon at the forces camped at Fort Albert on the 11th of May. What followed was a brutal campaign against the survivors and civilian population, as the Draconis Combine searched frantically for the SLDF secret base within the Nagayan Mountains. Nothing was off limits if it resulted in the discovery of the hidden cache. Civilians were rounded up, interrogated and tortured in an effort to locate it. Eventually, their lack of success led them to detonate a nuclear weapon within the capital, Freeport.
Wow.
By the 28th, the DTMS was pulling back, having determined that the weapons cache had either been emptied by the FWLM or the SLDF before them, or was simply a myth. As the Taisho departed for orbit, he contacted the coordinator to inform him that they had failed to locate the secret base. Minoru's response was to order his fleet to chastise the local population for their lack of assistance. Olav Nansen gave the order and began the Ghost Rain Protocol. Their full arsenal of nuclear ordnance and naval batteries was unleashed on Helm's major population centers. In less than an hour, approximately 10 million civilians were killed, the greatest loss of life since the New Vandenberg campaign during the Reunification War, a battle that had raged for many months. In the subsequent years, a further 60 million civilians perished in the nuclear winter, and another 20 million were displaced by the carnage. In May of 2788, it was unquestionably one of the greatest atrocities in human history. By year's end, those numbers would be almost insignificant.
That's insane. That's insane. All that for an SLDF, a Starleague Defense Force cache, which they couldn't even confirm even existed to begin with. Yo, Minoru Kurita is out of his mind. Just orbital bombardment of nuclear missiles, wiping out 10 million people and left another 60 million to die in a nuclear winter for something that they don't even know even existed. And because they didn't help out, so therefore the punishment is vaporized, nuclear holocaust. Does he get killed? I hope he got killed in this war. Minoru Kunita needs to die, hands down. You don't, jeez. You would think that after that. Was this like a turning point? Well, no, it's clearly not a turning point. There was still more to this war. But still, you would think that after that, everybody would all look at the Draconis Combine and kind of just, set aside their differences and just go and lay waste to the whole entire house. Because if he's willing to do that, to wipe out 20 million people over a cache, unconfirmed weapons cache, then you shouldn't leave someone like that running around for long. Whew. Operation Solar
Back
Shield.
in the Federated Suns, Operation Solar Shield was getting underway. It began with the botched assault on Elbar that May. Upon arrival, they failed to locate any hostile naval presence, and so began their burn towards orbit, only for a Combine warship to suddenly appear behind them and destroy their jump ships. The stranded dropships transferred as much of their material into their escort as possible, before cruising straight past their target, abandoning their vessels, and jumping out in the days that followed. Shadar was an even greater disaster. While the two Vincent-class corvettes engaged each other, the DCA destroyers completely ignored the incoming fire from the remaining escort warship to focus on the approaching dropships. Yet another AFFS regiment was destroyed before even making landfall, as were the naval elements soon after. To help pull some of the attention away from the Terran end of the front, John Davian had ordered those forces who had retreated deeper into the Fairfax combat region to instead squeeze the Curitan advance from the other end. The final target in the ill-fated Operation Solar Shield was Cartago, where the strength of Alexander were making landfall in early June. With them was the First Prince himself. A pair of warships served as escort for the assault force, and were able at first to drive off their opposite number from the Draconis Combine Admiralty. The Davian Guards descended to secure the capital's spaceport, but found it strangely deserted. The ships around them were civilian designs, not military as they had first appeared. They were also in serious disrepair. The mystery resolved itself when the Draconis Combine remote detonated a nuclear weapon hidden among the vessels. John Davian's saving grace was that the detonation was somewhat premature, and only a company of mechs were caught in the explosion.
Alright.
It had nonetheless shaken his composure, and he ordered his regiment back to their dropships when they detected a large aerospace fighter force on fast approach. At the same time, a trio of Curitan destroyers now moved around the planet to engage their escort and cut off their exit. Miraculously, the First Prince was able to escape the system alive, but only thanks to a holding action that lost him yet another warship. Operation Solar Shield was an unmitigated disaster for the Federated Suns. If there was any silver lining at all, it was that the field marshals at Fairfax had actually managed to liberate most of their combat region. Elsewhere, the best victory they could claim was the death of the Coordinator's cousin Vincent Curita, whose claim to the New Avalon throne had begun the War of Davian Succession half a century earlier. The main Combine advance continued unabated, however. In less than 2 years, the Draconis March had been halved in size. By the end of 2788, more than 25 regiments had been destroyed by the Curitan tidal wave, almost a quarter of their pre-war strength. A few battalion-sized units had formed behind enemy lines on Dobson, Franklin and New Roads, and miraculously Colonel Michael Barlow's battalion was still fighting on Cussor, as were some of the survivors on Galtor despite being two of the first worlds hit. The Dragon now sat directly on the border of the Crucis March. This region of space had not seen combat since the Davian Civil War 2.5 centuries earlier.
Well, they're about to see it now.
It seemed unthinkable that another realm would ever push so far into their territory. Morale across the military was absolutely shot. And unfortunately for House Davian, Curita was only just getting started. Earlier in the year, Jerome Blake had returned from his voyage with promises from each of the successor lords to respect Comstar's neutrality. The conditions of the Communications Protocol of 2787 were already being enforced across the Inner Sphere. Back on March 13th, he had outlined his plans for a revised Operation Silver Shield. The situation in the Terran hegemony was more dire than ever. Though it was only a suspicion at the time, documents recovered in the years since prove that both Minoru Kurita and Kenyon Malik were already making plans for an assault on Terra. Blake had strengthened his forces by approaching mercenaries of SLDF vintage and offering them spare parts stockpiles, but he now called for his full power. Operation Silver Shield began on June 25th at 0600 Terra Standard Time. Every hyperpulse generator within the Sol system suddenly went dark, and this soon spread to the entire network, cutting off all interworld communications. Without a means to contact their neighbours, nobody realised this was anything more than a local failure and not a deliberate act. This shutdown was timed to coincide with the arrival of former SLDF troops on Terra.
Wow.
Comstar had secretly organised its forces into 8 expeditionary brigades under the command of General Lauren Hayes.
Yo, Comstar is crazy.
Their first targets were the Space Defence System emplacements, securing the world against all but the largest hostile fleets. The The small garrisons maintained by each successor state were promptly disarmed. Only the AFFS garrison at Berlin resisted for 5 hours. Elsewhere in the Sol system, the warships Comstar had hidden quickly brought the other planets and facilities under their control. With Comstar and Blake in particular viewed in such a favourable light by the Terrans, the government welcomed the takeover. The only stubborn resistance Hayes faced was a pair of former SLDF divisions that refused to go along with their orders. Operating out of the Manaus Castle Bryan, they fought for 3 days until the 1st and 5th Comstar Expeditionary Division were able to overrun their position.
Okay.
The HPGs came back online on the 28th, carrying a message across the Inner Sphere, informing them of the events on Earth. Terra had been claimed as a Comstar protectorate. The successor lords reacted with indignation, claiming that Comstar had violated its own neutrality. Unfortunately for them, with the First Succession War in full swing, they would need the continued support of the HPG network in order to complete their own campaigns before they could divert sufficient forces to seize Terra as their own. The original plan for Operation Silver Shield had called for Comstar to take control of all of the Hegemony core worlds, but Blake wisely saw that this would surely provoke a hostile reaction. Instead, the Comstar Expeditionary Divisions moved to New Earth on July 3rd and began to dismantle the former Regular Army headquarters there. By the time they left a week later, there was nothing of use left. This would be the last time Comstar took overt military action in the First Succession War. They spent the next few decades securing their position politically on Terra, while trying to make themselves less of a target for the successor states by decommissioning their naval yards and secreting their many weapons stockpiles somewhere on Earth.
Smart. Okay. Comstar pulled off a very risky move on this one, shutting down the JB network and blinding everybody while they went in full operation to take over get back some of the worlds that they lost and take control of Terra, aka Earth. That was a pretty risky move, but it paid off, and the houses couldn't do anything about it. Like he caught them all off. Jerome Blake really caught them all off guard, and in turn reaffirmed neutrality by dismantling the naval forces, which now made it very hard. So that's how he was able to secure Terra and prevented it from getting taken over. I'm assuming. Let me know if I got that right in the comment, if I understood that correctly. Jerome Blake and Operation Silver Shield effectively took Earth and Terra out of the equation of the war, basically. Yeah, like they'll still be the houses may still be able to take over parts of the galaxy. Most of the Terran hegemony, but they'll never be able to take Earth the way that they want to take Earth. Any one of the houses. He basically prevented any possibility of them to legitimately march on down. So in other words, that means that Kurita himself, Minoru Kurita, while he may have declared himself having the Iron Throne, it would mean nothing. It would mean nothing. Let me know if I got that right. It really doesn't hold any type of weight now because of the fact that Jerome Blake was able to neuter Terra and render it worthless, because Terra is the key to the key to everything. But without Terra functioning the way it's supposed to function, none of the houses can really they could take Terra, but they can't do it effectively. If that's what I understand Jerome Blake was trying to do by doing what he did with Comstar. So basically, Comstar is in control of Earth, but they made it very hard for the houses, to be able to make a move where they can claim it and then use that as leverage to control the galaxy. I think I got all that wrong. Battle for Tyrfing.
Hunting for hidden Star League caches was becoming a popular pastime for every major house. The Draconis Combine had left Helm empty-handed, but they weren't the only ones searching within the Free Worlds League for one of Kerensky's abandoned stockpiles. In July, the armed forces of the Capellan Confederation and Lyran Commonwealth both dispatched a pair of regiments to the former provincial capital, Tirfing. The planet had been heavily scarred during the Civil War, and over the ensuing decade, over 1 billion civilians had emigrated off-world. Nevertheless, the ruined Castles Brian likely still housed valuable supplies and equipment, making it a priority target. Rumours suggested that Marek was trying to bring the space defence system back into operation, which gave them additional urgency to strike sooner rather than later. The defending regiment excelled in ambush tactics, inflicting a heavy toll on the raiders. However, with 4-to-1 odds, there could be little hope of victory, even if the attackers were occasionally forced to fight each other. Colonel Sullivan sent out a call for reinforcements. To buy themselves time, the Marek militia turned to weapons of mass destruction, particularly favouring chemical weapons recovered from the ruins. This devastated the conventional forces deployed to Tirfing, turning the campaign into an all-BattleMech affair. Orient SR reinforcements arrived in the following weeks, but the situation soon became even more convoluted. Desperate to find anything that might help them turn the tide against the Kiritan onslaught, a Davian raiding party touched down in August. Their sizable infantry complement faced immediate disaster when they disembarked into a radioactive and poisoned hellscape.
Wow.
Task Force Devlin's attack on New Delos had
when in
threatened
doubt,
to severely
nuke about.
weaken the strong ties between House Marek and House Allison. The Grand Duchy of Orient had been their strongest and most loyal supporter, but the Captain General's inability to defend one of his own systems from the Capellan attacks, coupled with his need for the Duchy to send its own units into occupied space, was a bad look for Kenyan Marek in Parliament. He now sought vengeance against Liao, beginning with the orbital bombardment of Ingersoll in July. The primary target was the dropship assembly yards, but the destruction soon spread to the popular holiday and tourist beaches nearby. Worse followed at New Canton in August. The Marek flotilla did not land any forces to take the planet, just simply bombarded the major military, industrial, and residential districts from space. The following month, they went after the supply depots at Outreach, and then conducted another firebombing campaign against Hull in November. Civilian deaths were in the hundreds of thousands, but that was barely a drop in the ocean compared to what the Inner Sphere was about to bear witness to.
Operation Destroyer of Worlds. Yeah, these guys just really love their nukes. It's almost like a default button for them. Just nuke, nuke, nuke. When in doubt, nuke about. And we still have... And this is only year 2. This is only second year. So far, 60 million alone in one planet was completely wiped out from a nuclear holocaust and a nuclear winter. Seriously, what is their obsession with dropping the nukes? Oh man, it's completely mind blowing. You know, every time I keep hearing, yeah, let's drop a nuke. It's like, wow. And it's scary. It's scary. Destroyer of Worlds.
Back in October, the chaotic battle raging on Tirfing reached another level. With the arrival of the Draconis Combine mustered soldiery, Tirfing became the only time in history that a 5-way battle had been fought between each of the successor states. In a notable twist of fate, 2 former units of the Rimwell's Republic would battle against one another, the Black Sharks and the Stealths.
Whoa.
In December, fighting intensified as the 11 regiments closed on the Great Crystal Valley, one of the greatest natural wonders of the Inner Sphere, site of towering phosphorescent crystals as large as glaciers. Whole battalions would vanish into underground warrens, caves, and Star League bunkers scattered across the region, never to re-emerge. Alliances were formed and broken on an hourly basis. 2 whole regiments were destroyed across the 6-day battle, and the crystal formations that predated humanity itself were trampled into dust. What little of value was found barely compensated for the material lost in its acquisition. The fighting continued into February
Look at that. Look at all these
2789,
mechs.
at which point the survivors all
art.
pulled back. Another of the Terran hegemony's jewels had been thoroughly despoiled. The profligate use of nuclear and particularly chemical weapons had left it virtually uninhabitable. Tirfing had suffered at the hands of Amaris during the Civil War, but the SLDF campaign had kept the use of WMDs to military targets primarily. The same was not true of the First Succession War. Less than 8 million civilians had survived to see the great houses depart.
Wow.
The final death toll, 1.6 billion. The blockade of Inglesmond had been going on for almost 2 years. It remained one of the most economically viable systems within the Terran hegemony, but the situation on the ground was dire. The Combine hoped to starve the government into submission and claim the industrious planet for themselves. The inhabitants did not want to give up their freedoms to the draconian House Kurita, but things were getting desperate. A request for aid went out to both the Federated Suns and Lyran Commonwealth, promising to join their realm in exchange for assistance in repulsing the dragon. Neither was in any position to help, but saw an opportunity to deny the Kuritans another valuable system. When they arrived, their objective was simply asset denial. Inglesmond watched in horror as the troops that they believed had come to save them instead unleashed an array of nuclear weapons against them and any DTMS targets of opportunity. The enraged Combine responded in kind, leading to a cataclysmic fallout on the ground. When the dust settled and the Kuritans looked at what the battle had won them, they found nothing but ash. Of the once 4.25 billion people that had called Inglesmond home, barely 10,000 anguished souls were left.
Jeez. More again with the
2788 is the year where the First Succession War passes beyond easy comprehension. The Star League Civil War, which just a decade earlier was the bloodiest conflict ever fought, was now nothing but a prologue to the apocalypse which had been unleashed by the successor states.
That's very true.
In 2 years, or on just one planet in the case of Inglesmond, more people had been killed in combat than in the entire 100,000 years of human history. And in the eyes of House Davian and Steiner High Command, that was a successful raid. The carnage being wrought all along their borders had so desensitized them to the use of weapons of mass destruction that the extermination of billions was now nothing but an unfortunate but necessary act to deny their true rival a valuable asset. (2788) also marked the end for the Terran hegemony.
Wow.
When Comstar took over control of Terra and made no provision for the governance of other neighbouring systems, the former Cameron worlds found themselves without a home nation. The effects were similar to the demarcation declaration that followed the Outer Reaches rebellion half a millennia earlier.
Man, look how
It
that's
would
shrunk.
take a few more years for all of them to be subsumed into one of the successor states, but for all intents and purposes, the Terran hegemony was dead.
What an end. Man.
Well, I said it was going to be a somber episode, and I meant it. This is unquestionably the darkest point in the timeline. There's never again a year quite as bad as this. I wish I could say it was over though. Next year, the successor states are going to do the exact same thing, and this isn't the last planet with a population in the billions to be completely wiped out. When I used this song in the past to conclude the reunification war, I thought it perfectly captured the mood I was going for showing those casualty graphs, and yet looking back, that is just a drop in the ocean compared to what has happened now. I bring up the reunification war because back when I was reading through the sourcebook, there was one particularly vile character I wanted to shed more light on, and that was Amos Forlow. And it's been interesting, I feel like I see his name brought up more now than I did in the past, as one of the truly evil people from the franchise's history. Why is that important? Well, it's because in the first Succession War, the one thing that'll get mentioned more time than anything else is, of course, the Kintari massacre. And yet, as important as that is, and as awful as it is, the loss of life is tiny compared to what happens in 2788. And yet these cataclysmic events so rarely get discussed. Tyrfing and Inglesmond, like I said, the first of several planets which are gonna suffer almost a complete loss.
This was year 2, from what I understood, and noted in the last video. Last video was year 1. This is supposed to be year 2, and the number of planets had just been irradiated to the point of oblivion. That 1.5 billion at least were wiped out. First at which one got the hit? Let's see. From Operation Ghost Rain Protocol, Freeport, the city, Hesperus, Freeport, the city alone got nuked out, the capital, and left 10 million instantly vaporized, and 60 million died from nuclear winter. Then there was here at Tierling with 1.6 billion dead. It's so incomprehensible just how they could do all this. And Tierfing was definitely one of the big battles, because there was all 5 houses converged on that, and they left the whole entire planet completely uninhabitable at that point. Biowarfare, nuclear warfare. What are they trying to accomplish here? Well, apparently they're trying to find the weapons cache. Basically, that's what it was all about. They want the SLDF weapons cache that Kerensky hid, or that hid when he left behind the whole thing. I need an understanding on that one. I most definitely need an explanation. Why is that important? Is there something to the technology, because it's Terran technology, that that these 5 houses want to acquire? Is there some kind of tactical edge, tactical advantage to it? Because I was under the impression that it was the throne that was important, because Minoru Kurita declared himself the First Lord, and they want to, and I would have thought that they would all focus on taking him out, saying, since they want the throne. But apparently that's not the case here. Apparently it seems like they want the tech, the SLDF tech, and Jerome Blake apparently made it harder for them. He was Operation Silver Shield. Nobody's actually making a move on Terra. At this point, I would have thought they would make the move on Terra, and I really would like to understand why that is, both from a tactical, strategic, and political standpoint. Because it seems all this, going into other worlds and blowing up and nuking buildings of people, I don't think it's very productive in this case here. I don't know how it's really supposed to help them with their end game for all the houses, especially now that the Terran hegemony basically in and of itself died. So what does that mean? What do you mean by died? Well, basically, the politics, the old space defense, the Star League. Star League is basically gone. In other words, it was the final stamp. It was the final stamp. Comstar, ran off with whatever they could, whatever advantages and gains they could get. And surprisingly enough, according to the map, at this point, nobody's really taking any more systems, and nobody's making a run for Terra. And I'm very perplexed on that. If it's really, because I know, excuse me, I know that Terra would have not only the largest natural resources, like the most sufficient resources that they may need, but would have they would have access to everything that is Star League, whatever was left behind by Kerensky, and does have a tactical edge. I can understand that, if that's the reasoning. I'm trying to figure out why they're nuking the other planets and just not going for it. I know that some of them, like Hesperus, are facilities, so you want to disable their supply lines. Okay, I get that. I just can't figure out, other than taking over planets, why they're not going for Terra. You know what I'm saying? That's the thing that's kind of boggling. I'm sure later down, I'm sure in the next videos, Sven Vanderplank will explain and such. And if you and like I said, I'm looking for I'm focusing on specific battles, but if you think that this going through all of the first secession war by Vanderplank, if you think that it would carry, it's very important for me to complete Vanderplank, let me know down in the comments down below. But I'm probably gonna want to try and find the rationale behind these strategies and tactics, because it seems weird that they're not gunning for the rest of the worlds and Terra, that they're just gonna leave it like that. So I would like to know if Vanderplank's gonna answer such questions, and if it's something I should finish, you know what I'm saying, and instead of jumping to a key battle from Vanderplank. So yeah, I mean, the lore masters really did a good job displaying how horrifying war is, and how cruel it could be done to civilians. I mean, Kurita completely annihilated Hesperus just because nobody helped him look for a cache. They couldn't even confirm a Star League weapons cache. They didn't even confirm even existed to begin with. It was just rumor, and he just completely nuked all the people just because they didn't help. Like, what could they do? They don't know, and all the civilians that are dying out just like that. It's very incomprehensible, and yeah, Vanderplank is right. It's very sombering. It's horrifying, quite honestly. It's this BattleTech is way more darker than I had anticipated, especially compared to Warhammer. This is beyond grim dark. This is like nihilism dark, and they're doing a good job. I can tell you that much, And I wonder how big the human population is now. I don't know if I got the number before. If I did, then I definitely forgot it. I'm not even sure if I got them in my notes here. But I wouldn't mind knowing how many what the actual population is. It's probably in the trillions at this point in time, like 2 trillion or something, to be able to wipe out 1 billion. I mean, that's a whole planet. That's practically a whole planet. So yeah, if you we gotta keep on going on this one here. You know what I mean? We gotta keep on going on this one. Gruesome. Now I'm very curious about what happened, especially Furlough. I want to try and find the Katori massacre in Furlough. I would like to know what the heck happened with that. If it's anything like Tierfing, I like to know about that. So yeah, Vanderplank is doing a great job, man. Bringing it all together. So, head on over to Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com and grab yourself a copy of The Impossible Man, a Strange Fantasy Novel in Miami. You'll find links to the book down in the description below, along with links to other merch such as pins, stickers, t-shirt, music. Enjoy the product. Thank you for your patronage. And if you happen to have a copy of The Impossible Man and did a lore video on it, thank you very much. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on it. And if you're interested, you can join me in my live multi-stream on Twitch and Kick every Monday through Friday, 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where I do lore research, Japanese cultural studies, gaming, and more. I look forward to hanging out with you. So until the next round of BattleTech Mech Warrior Research, thank you all for joining me and wish you all a good night. Buenas noches, and oyasumi nasai.